Morning. Like most ministers, I guess at this time, I've been pondering resurrection. What does it mean? How do we talk about it in this world, in our churches, in the electronically connected, digitally connected way this Easter? They will proclaim in some form, Christ is risen, he is risen indeed. What does that mean? I don't mean in the broad theological terms or the deep theological terms, but what does it mean for you and I and us in life? What does it mean in the midst of coronavirus or COVID-19? I told a story to one of the congregations I preached at just a few weeks ago. It's a story of a young man called Jimmy Lee Davis. He was a pretty violent young bloke. He raped a woman, served a sentence, came out, raped and murdered a teenager. He was convicted and put on death row. The headline came out, "Mother says, I want my son to die." She'd written a letter to the governor saying her son was so evil and his crimes were so horrific. She said, don't pardon him, send him to death row. A young fellow in Melbourne, a Pentecostal Christian, read the story and felt something for this guy. He was horrified by the crimes, but he just thought, if this guy knew the Christ that I knew, that I know, the God that I know, I reckon his life would be changed. And so he wrote a letter to this Jimmy Lee Davis on death row. He thought, well, that's it, I won't hear anything more. And so he was quite surprised that a couple of weeks later he received a letter back from this fellow. And Jimmy Lee Davis said, that's the best letter anyone's ever given me. I wish I could know this God that you know and this love that you know. I made such a real mess of my life and other people's lives that I wish you could come and tell me. The young bloke prayed about it, thought about it, talked to his pastor, his friends, his family. They and him were convinced that he was called to go and talk to Jimmy Lee Davis and share faith in God, love, whatever that meant. But money was the issue. He didn't have the money to travel to the States. But friends and others who heard the story gave him money, and he had enough to go to America. So off he went. He went to where it was, I think in Texas, found somewhere to stay for a couple of months while the length of his visa, 2 or 3 months. Instead of preparing all this beforehand and getting all the permissions to go into prison and all of that, he just rocked up at the door, and by some coincidences or whatever, he was allowed in. He was given permission to visit Jimmy Lee Davis twice a week, 4 hours at a stretch, for the length of his visa. So twice a week, he would wander into death row, into this cell, with his guitar, his Bible, and himself. And over the course of these couple of months, they chatted, they talked, they studied the Bible. This young fellow shared his own experience of what I can only call resurrection life, the transforming life of the Spirit, of how the reign of God had changed him, of how God's love in his life had changed him. They shared Bible stories and prayers and songs, and gradually Jimmy Lee Davis gave himself more and more into this love. And there was this gentle, gradual transformation. On the last day that the young fellow was able to stay in America, he went to the prison, and there the chaplain of the prison was there, and they baptised Jimmy Lee Davis. It was a beautiful moment, a complete transformation in this person's life, from this violent, horrible, evil killer, rapist and killer, to someone who is completely different. Jimmy Lee Davis said, "Look, I've done some horrible things and I've ruined some lives, and I'm not going to use my conversion to get off my sense to seek a pardon. I've done the wrong thing, I've done evil, and I deserve the punishment that comes with it." So anyway, the young fellow from Melbourne left and went home, as according to his visa. And they corresponded over the next couple of years. And then one day, he was at work and his wife called and said, "Come home quickly, Jimmy Lee Davis has got permission to receive one phone call. He's going to be put to death tonight." So he rushed home and put the call through. Jimmy Lee Davis came onto the phone and they chatted. Well, Jimmy Lee chatted. The young bloke was just too emotional. Jimmy Lee said, "Man, thank you. I just can't express how deeply grateful I am. You've given me life. These last couple of years have been the best years of my life. I know a love in my heart that I never knew. I know a way of seeing the world that is different. I'm a different person because you shared God's love with me. Thank you. And we'll see each other again in that eternal reign realm of God. God be with you." And hung up. That story for me is an expression of resurrection, the reign of God. It's when this reality, this other reality breaks into human life. It changes the way we see everything and changes us. It's a profound mystery that is hard to talk about in many ways, but it's one that's all around us. And yet we don't always see it. And when we do, the world looks different. For me, resurrection, the reign of God, is God's presence in everything. It's a way of seeing that we are connected to one another and to the earth itself. That we are part of this creation that is loved by God. That God values and loves so profoundly and deeply, that comes and dwells amongst us in flesh, in the Christ. And that in his death and his resurrection shows us another way, that the world and its powers will kill Jesus. And yet, those powers and that death cannot destroy him or hold him, but love brings life and sustains life. There is nothing that the world can do that can separate us from that love of God in Christ. That for me is the essence of resurrection. And in our life, in our world, in our way of being, and it's a way of seeing God in a different way, the world in a different way. It's about living, loving, relating, including, sharing. In this coronavirus crisis, people stockpile toilet paper. That's just a microcosm of humanity. We fear, we panic, we cling to something, we accumulate. It's toilet paper, it's meat, it's food, it's pasta, it's rice, it's whatever. We accumulate all this stuff, and yet we don't need to, because there's enough for everyone if we share it. And maybe through this we will learn to share. We will learn that the reign of God is about sharing, that there is enough in this world for everyone, not enough for us if we accumulate and are greedy and self-centered. Because the reign of God draws us out of that, out of ourselves. It's not about me, it's about us. And it's not just about us as humanity, it's about us in the world with trees and plants and animals. And you know, we made such a mess of this earth. It is so struggling under the weight of humanity. Maybe this coronavirus crisis has given the earth a rest. And maybe it'll help us to see that we don't need to rape and pillage the land like we do and pull the resources out and accumulate them for ourselves. But we can live more simply. We can share life more profoundly. We can engage with one another at a deeper level and with the earth itself. The stories in the Gospels around resurrection are mysterious. There's many of them, and they try to describe, to tell this mystery, this wonder of the people have encountered. Decades after Jesus, these disciples, the followers of Jesus, faithful people, have experienced the Christ in their lives. The reign of God which has changed their way of seeing and being. And they need ways of telling this story, because I think ultimately resurrection can only be expressed in story, in music, in art, in images, in the beauty of the world, and being lost in that. For me, resurrection is a way of engaging now in the world in a new way, an evolving way that will open me to a more full awareness and appreciation of the life I live, and the life around me, the people, and the world. And it asks questions of me: how do I live? How do I live a life that values people and the earth? How do I value the first inhabitants of this land? Those who are stewards of this nation, this land, this place, millennia before I arrived or we arrived. What do I do in terms of those who are refugees and asylum seekers? How do we share life and space with them in their desperation? How do we treat people who are different? How do we live in love? Because love is the heart of God and the heart of everything. I invite you to ponder resurrection, to ponder life, and the love that God has for each one of us, and the transformation that can make in our world when we live it. May God be with you this Easter and beyond.